Yes, it is true. I have actually started a super secret podcast, and for the first time publicly, I want to upload an episode and share it with you guys. Normally, the super secret podcast, which is actually unironically the name of the super secret podcast, is something that I only release to my patrons and is something that's kind of a private perk for those who are supporting the channel. But given the state of things that are happening all around the world and the copious amount of free times that many of us have found, I figured I'd do my best to help with the whole quarantine thing going on and release a little bit extra content for you guys to enjoy. So here's exactly what the Super Secret Podcast is all about. With I'm Listening, I create, one feature-length episode. We've released 2 episodes now. First one was Ronnie the Atheist. Second one was BB, the one on abortion. And with each of those episodes, they're only about 20, 30 minutes long, but full-length episodes end up being about an hour, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, depending on the actual interview that we do. And so I distill the episodes into this short little bits, and then I also release the full-length episodes on Patreon if you want to check them out, patreon.com/jku. But in addition to that, myself and my good friend Kaleb, who actually is one of the helpers on this show, the producer, story writer, he's a cool dude, someone with a lot of thoughts to share, a lot of opinions, things that we don't always see eye to eye on, but it's always a good and productive and healthy conversation. We do a podcast together called the Super Secret Podcast, where we talk about what we learned and what stood out to us from the I'm Listening episode. Like I said, usually it's super secret and it's only available to patrons, but I figured this time around I'd share it with you guys and let you guys in on the conversation. And I hope you guys are staying healthy. I hope you're doing all the hand washing and the sanitizing and the self-quarantining and doing your part to keep everyone healthy. And so in order to help out a little bit, I hope you enjoy. This is episode number 2 of the Super Secret Podcast. If you end up listening to this and like it and you want to see more of it, you can actually see episode 1 of the Super Secret Podcast, as well as a bunch of the other behind the scenes and extended content and things like that. There's a bunch of extra things over at patreon.com/jku. But enjoy and stay healthy. All right, welcome back to the Super Secret Podcast, episode number 2. I'm Justin.
I'm Kaleb.
And this is the Super Secret Podcast.
Yeah, it's exciting to be back for the second time.
Yes, as you can tell, we are in our study with our copious amounts of books and paintings behind us. That's not true. We're at a coffee shop here in downtown Vancouver trying to survive the coronavirus.
Yeah.
So we hope that you're doing well wherever you are.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. We're coming on the tail end of a week where literally everything in the world got canceled.
Yes.
More for you than me.
Yeah, like the next 6 months of my life has basically gone upside down. Speaking engagements, conferences, travel plans, the whole thing. But one thing remains, and that's the Super Secret Podcast. So what are we talking about today, Kaleb?
Yeah, we're talking about the episode 2 that we shot with BB on the topic of abortion, and the experience with that, and just a couple of different perspectives on it. And we're coming at this now after having released the episode, after the comments come streaming in, all these different angles of people. So we're after.
Yep. We debated doing an episode. Actually, we did shoot an episode before the YouTube video got released, and I thought it would be cool for us actually to revisit it, to look at how people have been responding, because there have been absolutely indicators that people have understood what the purpose of the episode is, as well as a lot of indicators that people didn't quite understand it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's good that you bring up that first recording that we did, just because since we were talking before it released, I think that there was so much unsaid and so much hesitation to just kind of say anything that would, I guess, slant people, like tell them what to think. I think that it was a lot harder to talk about it before really having it done and being able to respond to kind of what's happened since. Yeah,
but now that's behind us.
Yeah.
What have you seen in the response of people, by and large, in response to BB's episode?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is what I probably would have projected.
Yeah.
Whenever you talk about a sensitive issue, there are so many people that will get into the debate of whether that issue is right or wrong, what their stance is, and really miss what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so that's what I saw happen. A large portion of the comment section is a debate on the morality of abortion, on the, where they stand, very strongly where they stand, where everyone else should stand. But yeah, I think it would be great to kind of go into, is that what we're trying to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not. So let's put it this way. If the theology of abortion or the morality of abortion wasn't what we were going for, what's the alternative? Because that might not be obvious to many of us. I know that for me, like just rewinding my life back to maybe let's call it a year ago, it would have been really hard for me to understand, well, what's actually going on here? Why is this valuable? Why is this important? If we're not actually talking about what's right or wrong, what's true or false, then why are we talking about this to begin with?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of reasons. But number one, we mentioned this in the first episode, just the ability to create wherever you stand and your position and everything based on actually processing where other people are coming from, if that makes sense. So whether you land on a different, area on the issue after this episode or not, we hope that you will come from an angle of, okay, I have intentionally listened and processed the perspective of somebody who's actually dealt with this, where maybe we haven't. And what does that look like? Because the tendency is to just say, whatever I believe, the other side is stupid. Yeah. Or they're lacking information, or they're lacking the experience that I have, or whatever. And really what it comes down to is that person is operating out of a completely different set of perspectives, of experiences, of data, or even the same data, using it and looking at it from a different lens.
I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, I think like last week rather, and he was kind of poking at like, well, how have your convictions been challenged in like by having these types of conversations? I had told him not only about the abortion thing, Ronnie the atheist, but also some of the episodes that we have coming forward. And his idea was like, man, how do you keep your convictions strong in the middle of these challenging conversations? And it was something that was really interesting to ask from that perspective, because is your conviction strong? Is your belief strong if it remains untested? Yeah. If it remains unchecked? And not like, oh, I read about it somewhere over there, or like, I had a seminar at my church where we were all about pro-life, and then someone quoted one sentence of a pro-choice argument and then immediately debunked it. Yeah. That might be challenging for some people, but like really talking to someone who's got a well thought out perspective, like is your conviction truly strong if it's never been tested? And
should you want convictions that are based on a lack of exposure or a lack of information, right? Yeah. If I only believe something because I haven't heard anything else, what's the value of that? Yeah. Why hold strongly to something that you don't have anything challenging it, like you're saying?
I've thought about this a lot, like, because in our faith tradition, there's this absolute pervading sense that, well, we are right. We have everything, like from the minutia of theology to how we understand like the world, like everything about our belief is correct. And that's a very like bold assessment, and especially like being born into this faith tradition, it's like, well, what are the odds that I was just magically born and placed into this society where everything we believe is actually correct?
Absolutely.
Like, that's a very bold claim. And so either I have to be willing to say that's exactly the claim and I accept it, which, hey, if you do, cool, more power to you. Or you have to say, well, maybe there's a chance that something that I was told or taught or believe might be off even a little bit. And if that's the case, then we go about this journey of self-exploration and saying, well, what are those beliefs and where could I possibly be off? And this is the value of having these types of conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is such a great launching point for everyone involved in making the podcast, but also everyone involved in watching it. I guess the end of the episode is the beginning of the process of growth. Yeah. Right, if that makes sense. It's a launching point where at the end of this, you have the opportunity to go back through and say, why do I believe what I believe? Yeah. And what's making me think that? Because we've each been challenged in different ways. We still land on different sides if you were to talk to us about, where we stand politically on this issue. However, we've both been challenged in really good positive, healthy ways through doing the work of listening to somebody else, and then also doing a little research that we hadn't done before.
Yeah.
One thing that came out that really challenged me was there is this thing that's said often in kind of more liberal circles, like, if you care so much about women and babies and everything, what are you doing about it?
Right.
Right?
And the implication is that what the church is doing nothing. The church is only holding pro-life rallies. They're picketing, abortion clinics, and they're condemning and shaming people. Which, to be fair, there's a lot of that going on.
Absolutely.
But this narrative that's all that people of faith are doing, it was actually a narrative that both of us accepted. And in the middle of the conversation with BB, we just let it go.
Yeah.
There was no pushback on it, and like going through this process, sharing the content with people, we were challenged on this. Like, no, like do some research. And the research came out like, no, actually, statistically, people of faith are doing a lot.
Yeah.
And in fact, the very caricature of what's wrong with white evangelicalism in America, it actually turns out that's the very demographic of people that are doing the most statistically.
Adoptions, what else was
foster care, the whole thing. It turns out if you're a Christian, attend church every week, if you're white and male and whatever, like all these different categories, these are the people that are actually putting their money, quite literally their money where their mouth is, and actually adopting children and taking care of people without means.
And honestly, like I stand in the same place as far as like I am repulsed by people who will shame and threaten and get in the face of vulnerable people. That hasn't changed.
Yeah, and I think that we're in agreement on that.
A little bit of perspective on the stereotype I had in my head, that's changed. That was challenged by this doing some digging and learning, because now when I hear somebody who has a strong view that is going to be very different from mine, maybe even slightly offensive to me, I can actually say, okay, I'm assuming a lot that goes into this. I'm assuming that they don't do anything else but yell at people.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that they just care about numbers and not about lives and the quality of life.
Yeah.
But from the research that we found, it may be that it's a couple of different things going on at once. Yeah.
And that's exciting to actually get a more well-rounded view of everything that's happening.
Absolutely.
And that's on your side. And if it's not abundantly clear yet, on the issue of legislation in regards to abortion, not so much the morality of abortion, but the legislation, we come off on different sides of this equation.
Absolutely.
And as much as you're seeing a broader perspective, I am as well. It's not simply that everyone who's had an abortion or that's in favor of the choice being available legally, it's not as though everyone is a baby hater, everyone hates Jesus, who's that's just not the case. And I think the more that we dismantle these stereotypes of people, whatever the stereotype might be, we actually get to see the humanity, we get to see the nuance, and we actually get to understand where people are coming from, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and you really, going back to the comment section, you really see people have bought into these stereotypes very, very strongly. For the most part, a lot of the negativity I saw, it is this kind of shaming, like, how can you be Christian and think differently from me? You are this or whatever. And, my question as I'm reading through these is, what do these types of comments say about us? Right? Like, believing something strongly is one thing, but like, if you are coming from another perspective reading this, do you feel somehow compelled to, are you sympathetic with that when people are like vocally hostile to you?
This has been my biggest regret about this experience. It's the thing, like this whole, the premise of this show highlights this so much, and it's the thing that I'm like, if there's one thing I could change about the entire experience, is actually how people of faith respond to whatever the comments is. Because think, like what you're saying is, think of, for Ronnie's episode, an atheist reading through the comments.
Yes.
Think of someone who's not a person of faith listening through BB's episode. And then they see like the hatred of people of faith directed towards other people of faith. It's like, well, if that's what's going on in that club, like I want nothing to do with it. And it's just this crazy thing is like I always come back to this. By this you'll know that you're my disciples, by the love that you have one towards another. And it doesn't seem like that's always at the forefront of how we write comments on the internet, and maybe even how we interact with in person.
You know, it's easy to miss in all of the that went on because it's so much more popular to be angry around these issues. But within the comments, you also have people who are saying, hey, here are some resources. If you're watching this video and you're in a situation like this person.
Can you grab my lemonade real quick? Sorry, podcast listeners. I'm getting thirsty. I ordered a drink a while ago. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
When it comes to listening, I didn't do a good job.
If you go back and you actually look for, this is my favorite quote from Mr. Rogers, look for the helpers.
Yeah.
If you look for the helpers in the comment section under this video, you'll actually see some of the very people that I learned about. You see the people who are saying, look, yes, I believe in I am fully pro-life. However, I also care very much about the experience of people going through similar situations, and here's exactly what I'm doing to help.
I loved seeing that, and even like suggesting possible resources as to like, man, if only she had known about this other thing that was available in her county or something along those lines. Like we see some of those types of comments. And I love it because what it's doing or what it's not doing is it's not victim shaming.
Yes.
Like in this story, yes, of course, the unborn child is a victim of this like perfect storm of terrible circumstances. But in another sense, BB is as well.
Absolutely.
She's literally being threatened with her life by someone who has more power than her, and she's just not in a state to be able to reason what were some alternative options. And as much as we would have wanted her to pick those alternative options, it doesn't change the fact that in this moment she's a victim.
I think what's a little frustrating for me is like, imagine yourself in the same situation. Put yourself in her shoes. What do? You know, ask that of anybody who watched this video. Ask it of us. If we are put with the exact same circumstances, you know, it's really easy to be on the outside and just like, you know, trash the morality of whatever somebody's decision is. But you put yourself in that situation where your life is threatened and your health and all of this, and you're thinking about the future of that person and how you're not equipped to deal with the situation. Bring it down to that, and what do you choose?
I think that was like that question, or that idea was the thing that actually stopped me mid-interview. Yeah. Because, like, being completely transparent here, going into the interview, I fully intended to listen, of course, but also to really poke at her belief. And I think that there's a justification in that scripturally and theologically. Like, you have to deal with the implications that this child is a human person. So how can you have this stance? And like, so I really wanted to go toe to toe when it came to the debate about what's right or what's wrong. And the thing, like, we lead the interview with BB's story. Yeah. But what we don't show you is that there was like 30 minutes of us going back and forth, kind of debating before we got to that point. Yeah. And so in the interview, it might seem like I basically threw up my hands and threw up the white towel really fast, but it wasn't the case. Yeah. Like I was in that tension of what's right versus wrong for quite some time. She shares her story, and then I'm like, oh, because I'm thinking, well, what would I do in that moment? Yeah. I don't know. And so that's why I literally like, okay, well, what do you think is the right answer? Because I don't know.
And we have the privilege of talking about this issue as people who will literally never have to personally face that. You know, I mean, there is no situation, maybe somebody that I love, you know, maybe my wife or something like that, but I myself can talk about it from a position where I don't have to deal with the consequences of whatever I choose.
This is so true, and while this is true, I have a bone to pick with this idea. Because I don't think, and not that you're making this argument, but someone in the comments absolutely explicitly made this argument that because I don't have any possible world of experiencing this personally, that I don't get a voice, that I don't get the right to have an opinion. And so this person in the comment sections was engaging with me and challenging what I had to say, and said things like, I don't think that you're very empathetic at all, or that you're really listening, or all these different kinds of things. And we went back and forth multiple comments, and I'm literally, okay, well, like, what did you see? How could I have done it better? Because that's a genuine question. I want to know, if I'm coming across in a certain way, what can I do better? And it basically came down to the fact that she would not allow me to agree to disagree. And said, like almost exactly that I wasn't entitled to a disagreement on this. Like, almost like I'm not entitled to an opinion because of the fact that I'm a man.
Sure. Yeah, that's not the angle that I'm taking.
Oh, of course not.
But I do think that there is a certain amount of deferment that we should have in whatever conversation we have to the people that do face it personally. That's all I'm saying is that, it is.
When you say deferment, what do you mean by deferment? Because that word makes me uncomfortable.
Okay. So going into a little of my history, I am a victim of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There are going to be people who have an opinion on how serious this should affect your life, all of this different things. They're allowed to have those opinions. However, I do think that I'm the authority on my situation. And I think that I know more about this situation, having lived through it, than other people do that haven't.
Mm-hmm.
And so by deferment, I don't mean that no one gets to think anything about it. But what I mean is whenever you have somebody who's actually been through something, who's actually faced something, they have a type of knowledge that other people don't get.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying. It doesn't mean that the conversation is closed to everyone else.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. It's just they have a certain expertise having lived it.
Yeah. So can I shift the, I guess, point of our conversation real quick?
Yeah.
So there's a story in the Bible that I have been seeing more and more parallels with this experience. It's a story of the woman caught in adultery. Excuse me. And what I love, why I want to bring it out is because what I see in Jesus is what I wish I would see more in the world.
Yep.
Many of you know the story. A woman is caught in adultery, brought before Jesus, and basically the religious leaders like, well, what do we do with her? Implication like, hey, it's time to stone her because this is what the law states. It's a wrong thing. It's an evil thing. And there's a punishment. There's a penalty for this.
Yep.
And Jesus' response is so counter-cultural for that moment, even counter-cultural for us today, clearly, because we're having this response to this video. Jesus' response is, neither do I condemn you.
Yep.
I don't condemn you.
Yep.
And it's not that she wasn't wrong. It's not that she didn't do a legitimate evil.
Yep.
But even in the presence of that, Jesus didn't condemn her.
Yep.
And I thought, man, that is definitely not what we got to see in the comment section.
Yeah.
There was a lot of condemning going on for BB. And again, cool, rightfully so. We are all in agreement, or at least most of us are in agreement that thing is a human being. And yet, I want to believe that if Jesus was there, he's going to echo those words, neither do I condemn you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple of options, and a couple of them modeled in that story, right? We can attack the person's put in that position, or we can.
And this is
them.
so much different too. The woman caught in adultery wasn't even put in that position. Theoretically, in my mind, we don't have this explicitly, but BB was forced into this position, literally forced upon the penalty of death, kind of an idea. But the woman caught in adultery, one might think, was a willing participant in this act of adultery. And even with the willingness to do it, Jesus still didn't condemn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we see this with the woman at the well as well, right? He can be there are certain laws about her situation as well that he could have just gotten right into talking about how wrong she is, all this. And while he holds the position of morality that he did, he moved toward her.
Yeah.
Right? He moved into, I will personally have this connection with you. And that's what I want to see, especially from people that I disagree with as well. And people I agree with, is just this attitude of let me move toward you. Let me be with you and really digest this situation with you. Not as even whatever authority Jesus could claim, he didn't really use that as a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
He could, but he didn't. And I think that's what I want to be like.
Yeah.
That's what I want us to model, regardless of the conclusions that we come to. I want this spirit of connection.
I'd like to believe that even if you're in the presence of someone that you hold a disagreement with, but you live out this posture of moving towards people, they're going to be much more likely to still receive you as a friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
We see this in our friendship. We disagree on a lot of things, and yet I think there's a clear understanding that our posture towards each other and people is one towards rather than against.
And the truth is that we learn from each other more.
Yeah.
Right? Because we keep this attitude across our disagreements, I retain more of what you say, because I know that your heart is for me.
Right.
Right.
As
I
opposed
know-
to someone who holds my view, who's just
Mhm.
shouting it at you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, it's I would say that that's pretty common to encounter people who they really want you to know they're right, and they really want to force you and bulldoze you into that same position.
Yeah.
But their spirit is not, I care for you. I want to be with you, right, regardless of where you fall. And I think that's the difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You know.
absolutely. So we have a couple more minutes. We closed the episode with asking the viewers to reflect on the question. Well, what's something that I can do to make the world a better place for women, for unborn babies, etc.? And I want to throw around that question and reflect. Well, what are some possible things that we can do? I know for me, it's actually like literally been thinking about something to the extent of like, well, what would it look like for my wife and I to become foster parents,
Yeah.
or even technically, like theoretically, like adopt somewhere down the line. Like we have a couple of her cousins that have adopted multiple times. It's like, man, that's beautiful. What would that look like for us? And I know that we've had this conversation. You're like, that's definitely not it for us. Like
No.
we're not in a position. You and your wife are not in a position to do that. So when you think about your role in being part of the solution, what do you see?
Yeah, I think one thing that stuck out to me, going back to the comment section, is like, even as someone who is pro-choice, that doesn't mean that I want abortions to happen. I actually am in the position I want as few to happen ever as possible.
Right.
We just fall differently on like how to achieve that. So finding out about the resources that people can have and kind of bringing those and exposing those to people in vulnerable positions in a way that's not hostile. I think we have a lot of work to do there. I think not perpetuating the stereotype that I kind of was perpetuating, I think that actually adds to the fear, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because if I'm in a vulnerable situation, if I'm a woman who's stuck in this situation, and the belief is that everyone who's pro-life is going to just like jump on my back, then I'm definitely not going to want to be there.
Yeah, and I think people could have more resources and come from a more informed place with options.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, I do want people to see the options that they have. But I think that there's something to getting people to listen to the stories of people who have made these choices. Again, even if your view itself doesn't change on the legality of this, knowing why people decide what they decide and being part of a community that makes it safe for people, both who have had that and made that choice, and for people who have decided not to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I guess that the short version is I'm really being challenged as to how much practical help I am. If I'm not willing to adopt, because I'm not at this point in my life, what is the next step for me?
Yeah.
You know, what am I adding truly to people in a vulnerable situation? Because an opinion's nice.
Yeah.
And agreeing with people is nice, but how much does that add to someone's experience? You know, how much life am I bringing them? And so I think that's a real challenge for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that I have a great answer for that.
I think that's fair. That's honest. Because, you know, as much as I'm thinking about the adoption thing, I don't think it's something I can do in the near future. And, you know, after spending all this time with BB, it makes me want to be involved in some way, shape, or form, like, as much as I possibly can. And again, like, the question is like, well, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And I think I'm on the same page as you. I don't really know. I have an idea of it, but I don't know. Like, I feel like in order for me to take the next step, I'd have to go from like 0 to 100.
Yeah.
Like, literally adopt. And I'm sure that there's something in between. I think that there's something in the middle. And I think this is the importance of understanding what we're doing on this show. It's not the final arguments, close the book, move on to the next subject.
Absolutely.
It is just the opening of the conversation. It's the beginning of the journey. It's the beginning of this self-exploration and this study of whatever the subject might be. And so with that said, I would throw it to anyone listening.
Yeah.
If you've done a little bit more research and homework, and if you have any other ideas, let us know. We are interested. We are listening to what are some of the other options out there. What are you trying to do to make the world a safer place for women, for unborn children?
Yeah.
We really want to know.
Yeah, and really, if you have a good resource, put it in the comment section.
Please.
Because you do not underestimate the power that the influence that you can have by sharing those resources, because there will be people who never show up in our metrics, that never leave a trace, that are watching videos like this on this topic because they're struggling, because they're in this situation.
Yeah.
And the more that somebody knows, the more options that they have in making whatever choice that they're going to make.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
Just, it's going to be my mantra every time, is just, I hope that anyone participating and watching any of this is challenged to take the time with another human being.
Yeah.
Take the time to listen to their story and look at the world through their lens.
Beautiful. Thank you guys so much. Again, shout out to all of you guys. If you're watching this, it's because you're part of a very special group of people, the patrons, and we love you very much for it. We know that not everything that we show on this show is going to line up perfectly with everything that you already believe and that you want to see out there in the world, but we're here together because there's a commonality, there's a lowest common denominator, and that's human connection. It's this desire to understand. It's this curiosity about life and about spirituality. What does it mean to be a good human being? And so we just want to thank you guys for jumping on this wild ride with us, for being a part of it, and for literally making it possible. We could not do it without you. And so thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. See you next time.
Bye.